Hello and welcome to Scouching Live, the first afternoon installment of the show. I am Will. I am joined by my guest host for the day, a gigantic portrait of Rick Vive. So say hello, Rick. Okay, he's a little quiet today, but that's okay. Before we get started on the show, I just want to read off our sponsors of the show. So first of all, Fanatics. There's a QR code in upcoming in the full scene of the show. You can use it as an affiliate code. I'll get a kickback, a small kickback on anything you buy in the store. So if you want NHL gear of any kind or any gear of any kind of any sport, feel free to use the link, buy whatever you like, and it'll help support the show a little bit. Also, if you don't know, this show is fueled by Scouching.ca, a website where you can subscribe and get access to all kinds of different data tools, a private Discord server to chat with other fans of the project, as well as myself, and all kinds of fun little data projects that are going on in there involving the NHL and the NHL draft and prospects already drafted in the NHL and more. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a different thing here on Scouching Live this season that we kind of alluded to in the first episode, but we want to be a little more NHL focused. So we're going to split this show in two with some pre-planned segments up front, and then you can ask your questions in the early part, and then down the back half of the show, we're going to be answering your questions that you ask live on the show. I also want to take this time to announce and thank Puck Preps. I am officially a member of Puck Preps over there. My job will mostly be to cover 2006 borns for their NCAA routes and previewing college hockey and high school hockey and all that stuff. So be sure to check out puckpreps.com and subscribe over there if you want to read some of my work that's a little bit outside the scope of my typical work. But thank you to them for extending the olive branch. And you will also see work from my former I guess current co-host, but not the giant portrait of Rick Vive. Sam McGilligan is also part of the team, and he and I will be sort of tag teaming the 2006 players. So I am not alone today. Once again, I'm joined by my wonderful producer, AJ Jadaro. So he can feel free to say hello if he feels like it.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm doing all right, Will. I'm doing quite all right.
Doing quite all right, eh? So today we're going to be going through a few different NHL topics. It'll be, running the gamut of some stuff, both in the news and just sort of deeper NHL topics we want to talk about. So we're going to talk about the situation going on or situations with the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're also going to be talking about the things that may have changed with the new regime under Chris Knobloch with the Edmonton Oilers since they released Jay Woodcroft from his contract. We're also going to talk a little bit about the LA Kings, who are
Fun.
quite something. They're hot and they're so fetch right now for all you millennials. And we're going to talk a bit about the Washington Capitals, who are 11-6-2 to start the year, which is quite incredible, and we're going to dig into them a little bit. But first, we want to talk about Patrick Kane, because this is a really interesting story. Just because there's been a lot of attention from my perspective on Patrick Kane and what he's been doing, or the wait to get him back into the NHL, and how much courting there seemed to be. He's not playing tonight, but AJ pointed out that tonight they're playing the Chicago Blackhawks, and they lost to the New York Rangers last night. So both Patrick Kane teams, which is a funny little coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
But he will not debut until next week. So this is a relatively big NHL story these days. He is, I don't know, I would say an NHL Hall of Famer to be. He's 35 now. He's 35 years old, correct?
So you want me to check that?
Yeah, sure.
I will take a look.
I'm pretty sure he's 35. But anyway, he's in his mid 30s. So
yeah, he's 35.
So he's 35. One thing I want to do before we get into the what about this kind of thing. People are talking a lot about the surgery he had, a hip resurfacing. Oh, he's had this hip resurfacing. They talk about players who have previously had it, blah, blah, blah. But I haven't seen very much of an explanation of exactly what a hip resurfacing is, and I didn't know. So I asked the internet, and the internet gave me a good answer. So generally, this is a surgery that's given to people with advanced arthritis. So right there, that gives you a hint. If a full hip replacement is like up here, a hip resurfacing is like here. Like it's like if a doctor doesn't want to replace a person's whole hip, they'll do a resurfacing. So what happens is instead of replacing the whole hip socket joint structure, which is don't don't Google how they do it. It's not fun. But what they do instead is the top of your femur, which is the bone that links into your pelvis, and the damaged socket in your hip are then removed and replaced with some combination of metal, plastic, and ceramic. So the bones aren't taken out, but they're sort of shaved down and then stuff is put on top of it. So it's it's a pretty intense it's a pretty intense surgery. And I think it was Cam Robinson who posted a list of NHLers who have had it, and I believe 2 of them never played again, and the rest I don't think lasted a full season. And so the other thing too is that this surgery also wears off and it needs to be done again, or you have a full hip replacement later in life, and that only takes about 15 or 20 years. So not saying that obviously Patrick Kane's going to play until he's 50, but this is a serious thing. It also increases the risk of your hips dislocating, or sorry, decreases the risk of your hips dislocating. So that's good.
Just the one upside of everything you've read so far.
Yes, pretty much. So it's easy to do-ish to maintain it relative to a full hip replacement, but I mean, we're talking like super serious surgery versus quite serious surgery. And I mean, hockey, this article I'm reading specifically mentions that with hockey players, it's particularly important. Figure skaters as well, football players, basically any sport that really involves your legs as a principal movement. And so this is a serious thing. And so with Patrick Kane, yes, he's been skating, yes, he's been training. This surgery happened a while ago, and I'm sure he's ready to play hockey in some way. But the question of how much he's really going to move the needle, at least on the ice, I think, especially for a guy who, if I recall correctly, last year, both regular season and playoffs was sub point a game. You've got a guy who might not really move the needle a whole lot on the ice. And AJ, I'm just looking up and down the Detroit Red Wings lineup here. I mean, he could bounce, I'd say, one of the guys in their bottom 6 off the wing. A guy like Perron or Rasmussen.
They're never pulling Perron out of the lineup, though.
They'll never pull him out of the lineup. But maybe they could, theoretically. But like Klim Kostin could come out of the lineup. I see Jonathan Berggren got called up. I mean, I like him a lot, but they could pull him out of the lineup too. So there's spots for Patrick Kane. But I mean, it's the old argument of like, why would you play a good player with a broken wrist in the playoffs when are they really going to be as good as a lower level player that's perfectly healthy?
Well, I think the big thing is they're going to try and help. Like, not that Alex DeBrincat's been bad, because there was a stretch of the season where he was fantastic, but it's trying to find that chemistry again and put it together on Detroit. Now, I could see that as possibly working, but the concerns are still there about the hip. And is he going to really be an effective 5-on-5 player? We've seen for years, even without the hip injury, that he's not been that great on the defensive end, which, granted, that's not what you're paying Patrick Kane to do. But still, how is he going to move around the ice? Like, is he going to be just limited to being a power play specialist? Because he's still got incredible hands. You cannot deny the hands he has. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it works. And I would imagine they're going to try him with DeBrincat. Like, I would not be surprised at all if it's Lucas Raymond coming off the top line and they're going Larkin, Kane, DeBrincat.
Probably. And I feel like it won't take very long to notice if that's working or not, just judging by, what could Patrick Kane look like. But I mean, I don't know. I could see that happening, but I didn't know anything about what a hip resurfacing actually meant. And I was surprised at like just how intense of a procedure this is. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of an X-ray of a hip resurfacing, and it looks like a thumbtack is stabbed right into the top of your femur. So
Oh, that does not sound good.
It's a big thumbtack. So it's not a fun looking thing.
Just like the big giant portrait of Rick Vive.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if Rick Vive ever had his hip resurfaced, but
what are your thoughts, Rick?
Thoughts? Yeah, what are your thoughts? Do you chime in, man? He's not feeling super social today, but that's okay, Rick. The weekend's coming. You can rest. But anyway, yeah, so we'll see what happens. I mean, again, they're paying him a lot of money, but it's over at the end of the year. So
it's an all right bet. Scenario, it's an all right
worst case scenario, he gets hurt and that's it, right? And he maybe comes back for the playoffs. I don't know. But I'm tempering my expectations on him. So, and I'm also a little bit cut up that he took my good friend Daniel Sprong's jersey number, but that's not.
He'll probably get a Rolex or some really fancy dinner.
I mean,
I would
Bud, you're making $2.7 million. And Daniel Sprong, I would argue, has been quite a good hockey player, and he's been getting jerked around a little bit over the years. But anyway, we don't have to talk about Daniel Sprong today, as much as I want to. But in any case, yeah, of course. So AJ, you are a born and bred Leafs fan.
Oh, you're exposing me.
Well, it's the next topic.
It's not like I haven't exposed myself as one.
That's true. And they are certainly exposing themselves as this team. I think the same team they've always been in a way. It's like the three really smart kids in a trench coat, and the trench coat keeps changing every year. I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know. That just popped into my brain, and I felt like I had to say it. But we're going to talk about them a little bit because I think they're absolutely one of the more fascinating teams so far this year, and that's not just because I'm
painful
in the GTA.
Painful teams.
Yeah, you might use that word for sure. So I guess we can start with the early, because it's been 20 games, and 20 games is around the point where at least I feel like you can sort of see what a team is made of.
It's the American Thanksgiving rule.
Yeah, the American Thanksgiving rule. Would you consider the team, amongst what you've seen of other teams, would you consider them sort of contenders to sort of go deep?
I want to say yes, but the answer is no.
Right.
But I think it's fixable. Like, I don't think this team requires major surgery. I think their blue line's been hurt quite a bit this year. Yeah. And I think Timothy Liljegren not playing as much as he has hurt the team. Jake McCabe wasn't with the team for a little bit of time. I don't really care about the impact of Connor Timmins being out of the lineup because it's not like he's making much of a difference now. He can be really infuriating to watch. But I think for once, I think the actual mainstream idea of what this team needs to do and adding Tanev or Zadorov or both might actually be the solution to helping at least defensively.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the price tag on those guys.
Yes.
Because you and I have been talking about them a little bit over the last few days. And so I went out and watched a couple games of each of them. And I mean, are they upgrades, right? Are they going to be upgrades on the guys they have? Yeah, I would say so. Mm-hmm. Sure, right? Like, would I rather Nikita Zadorov or Simone Benoit in the lineup every night, or William Lagesson?
I'm taking Zadorov, okay, and it's not
those
even
guys
close.
Have been okay in a stopgap job, but yeah, I think I would take those guys. I think, yeah, I mean, it's really tough with them because they've always been a team for years where you watch them, and when they're rolling, they're one of the best teams in the league. Like, they have some of the best players in the league.
They might even be the most talented team in the league. Like, they're up there. They really are.
And watching other teams, like, I think with Leaf fans in general, like, getting outside of your bubble and watching other NHL teams and then going back and watching the Leafs and seeing things that, like, William Nylander can do, and Austin Matthews, and even a Morgan Riley at times, and Mitch Marner, you kind of go, yeah, these guys probably shouldn't go anywhere. Like, you immediately, like, I have been a William Nylander guy since the day he was drafted and have supported that guy forever. And I'm so happy he's having the year he's having, and I want him to get every dollar he earns. But he has been, and the reason for that is just how good he's been this year. It's like solidified it, because you always knew he was capable of doing stuff like this. And here he is, right? So it's a little bit, I guess you could say, strange that he's the guy. And again, in the playoffs last year, who was the guy that was every single game making stuff happen. And the Toronto Maple Leafs are like notorious for being a team that gets bogged down and slowed down and knocked around in the playoffs. But here comes William Nylander, and every single game you kind of see a collection of good things happening, and oftentimes it lands in a point or two on the night, or at least it should. And with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, I mean, they're still scoring a lot, but you kind of have to note that there are things that are a bit problematic when you dig deeper. I mean, Austin Matthews scoring 6 goals in the first 2 games, and what he has eight since in the last 18
And I
games.
think
Like,
he's on a 8-game goalless streak, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. Or maybe it's smaller, but like he's just not scoring in bunches.
and
Or scoring consistently. He's scoring in bunches.
yeah, and when you look at even a guy like Connor McDavid, right? Like, again, we're going to talk about the Oilers a little later in the show, but just watching a few games of him again getting out of that bubble, and you see Connor McDavid every single night doing stuff. You see Artemi Panarin every single night this year has just been out there creating and doing stuff. Nathan McKinnon, even David Pastrnak. I pulled a list of guys and how many scoreless games they have this season. Austin Matthews, I think, has 7 or 8, but you've got Kucherov with 5, Miller, JT Miller, Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, all at 5 games, Pastrnak at 4, Panarin at 3, Elias Pettersson 6, McDavid on the Oilers, McDavid is at 5. So all of these players are scoring more often, and they're a lot of them are paid less, and next year everyone will be paid less than Austin Matthews. So, and this is the whole problem with the Leafs, right? Like, by the time they get to the playoffs, they're so dependent, I think, on those big names being good all at once, that and there's just like no evidence that that's going to happen. But I mean, they've split up Marner and Matthews, so maybe that will work. I don't know. I mean, Nylander started with Matthews, right? Like, when Matthews' career started,
Yes.
I think those were the 2 guys playing together.
Yeah.
And I mean, Matthews scored quite a lot of goals with Nylander too. So I mean, maybe I don't see a reason why that couldn't work, because William Nylander is firing on every cylinder he has. So yeah, I think you're right though, where it's like they've been injured quite a bit. I don't think the team is like broken, but the fact that they've been leading a game for, I have it pulled up, the 1, 2, 3, 4, like 7th fewest minutes in the league so far,
and 5 regulation wins.
Right.
They have
and
6 extra time wins. So like overtime and shootout, they have 6 of their wins come from those. Well, 5 are in regulation, which is nuts.
Yeah. And the only teams that have been leading for fewer minutes on average a game: San Jose, Montreal, Calgary, Minnesota, Chicago, Anaheim. Those are not teams you want to be a part of. And those teams are all at 1 point per game, like wins or 2 points. They're at 1 point per game this season or less. And Toronto's at 1.25. So they're way beyond, like, their ability to come back is clearly unparalleled. Like, Carolina is in a similar boat, like, in terms of how much they've been leading games and scoring themselves out of trouble and winning games. But Carolina, Toronto, and Washington, another team we're going to talk about, are kind of on an island of they're always either tied or losing, but they come out with wins. So again, I don't know how that's sustainable based on, and again, this was something that also I felt like was a thing that happened with the Leafs last year, where they would go down and fight back and win, or they'd go down, force overtime and win. And then the playoffs come around and you don't get penalties. So you're playing at even strength way more often. And Toronto this season has not been a particularly great even strength team. Clearly,
except for when Nick Robertson's on the ice, it feels
except
like.
for when Nick Robertson, yes. Yeah, we can pound the table for Nick Robertson in every chance we get on this show. But with Toronto, I mean, yeah, like, then they get to the playoffs, the power play dries up, which was a major driver of their offense last year. The ability to, I mean, it just matters so much to be able to just go out and win a hockey game and take control of a hockey game. And it seems like for years this has been the problem. And so what's the solution? I have no idea.
Well, we've talked
I
about this before. Like one of the big things that you and I would both really like to see this team do is play a lot faster because that's when they're at their best, I find.
yeah.
I find that oftentimes they are just playing at the same controlled pace that they always do, and they're never able to ramp up to the moment. Like Florida was bullying them in the last game because they were just using their speed, and they're an aggressive team where their D activates a lot and like will forecheck guys, so that can be a bit jarring. And just because of that, like Florida has so many more chances, or at least dangerous looking chances, even if they're not actually, just the amount of pressure that they put on you is suffocating. And that's what really killed the Leafs. Even though the Leafs came out winning that game in the most ridiculous thing. Yeah. My dad was actually at the game, and he left, went home the night, thought that the Leafs had lost, only for me to tell him the next morning that he had left before the game had actually ended. And he was beside himself.
Fail.
Yep. That's what you get for bringing an Islanders fan to a game like that.
That's true.
Tells you it's over, it's done.
Yeah.
Let's get a drink, Bert. My dad's name is Bert, by the way.
Right, Bert, Mr. Bert. Hello, Bert. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting because again, like what's the prognosis, right? Like that's, at least Joseph Wool has been playing well.
Yeah, and he's starting tonight as well, which I think is deserved.
Yeah, so they're gonna be. I mean, no matter what they do, they're not a bad hockey team. They're just a team that often plays poorly, which is a strange thing to say.
They just can't elevate. It feels like because of and I was talking about it earlier, they don't ramp up and elevate their game, and they're just caught slower than the other teams.
You mentioned Florida, right? Like even a guy like Ryan Lomberg. Like Ryan Lomberg is the type of player. Yeah, the Lamborghini. Like he's the type of guy that Toronto has been looking for and spending millions of dollars looking for. And the closest thing they have to him is a guy that was a PTO and Noah Gregor. Like it's, and that was one where it's like, yeah, like San Jose let him go. And I spoke to a couple of Sharks fans who said similar things about him that are true in Toronto about, being shot first and not being the best, most accurate shooter in the world and taking more chances than he probably should on net, but still being a reliable, physical, speedy guy. But then you look at guys like, I mean, I kind of dig Max Domi, but he has not quite, he's gotten better, but he's not quite exactly what people thought they needed in Toronto. Like
I like him as a 3C though, because that's where he's had his best results. And playing him with Nick Robertson and Calle Yarncroke has seemed to really work wonders. Yeah, at least for that third line, because depth scoring has been a concern for years, and this year they're getting it, which is great. Yeah, which I'm very happy about.
So it'll be interesting because, I think you're right. Like Toronto, speed is a problem, and with Toronto, and this has been the problem for years. And I think we've talked about this. Like they need to have the game going their way to be good, and if it's not going their way, everything just grinds to a halt. And sometimes things aren't going to go your way, and you're going to need to get a bounce to go your way. You're going to need to put something on net and get something greasy, and I don't know. It's a very, very strange island that they're on. And one of the teams that they're on an island with is the Washington Capitals, who continuously seem to be doing just fine.
If you don't mind, I just want to add one last thing on Matthews.
Yes.
Usually when Austin Matthews is at his best, he's really aggressive and is like challenging on the inside, and like really you see him take over. And he was doing that at the beginning of the year where he was he actually looked like the Austin Matthews in the 60-goal season. But more recently, he hasn't been as aggressive as I would have wanted him to be, and I don't see him taking like 7 shots a game in a dangerous way. But that's all I want to add, and we can move on here because I don't want to beat the dead horse of the Leafs. I guess it's not a dead horse, but I just don't want to go on about them.
It's a sick horse, but still kind of winning races because that's how good the horse is at racing. Like it's kind of ill.
But yeah, we can get on here now.
Yeah, okay. So moving on to the Washington Capitals, because they are kind of in a similar but different island as Toronto, where things probably should be going a little worse, but because of other stuff, it's going really well.
Charlie Lindgren, baby.
Yeah, Charlie Lindgren. He's got some. He saved what 38 of 39 last night to steal a game from the LA Kings.
What's so funny about that game was the 1 minute of zone time that had to be called back off of the offside. It's so crazy.
In
that game, that is.
I love technology. There's a lot of technology at play literally right now in this room.
Will loves ChatGPT as well.
Yeah, ChatGPT, a phenomenal product. Sam pointed out just how disgusting the wire situation behind my computer is. So there's a lot going on here. So I'm a big fan of technology. I love it. But I am, over the years, slowly getting to the point where I'm like, you know what? The only things that should be video reviews are like goalie interference and did the puck cross the line.
Ooh, really?
I'm tired of offside reviews. Like that's a thing where either you make offside, like somehow you find a way to put a chip in the puck and a chip in people's skates to track offside by the millimeter, or you just don't bother. Like
that's an extreme example. Yesterday was an extreme example. Like when you see a goal getting called back and then they have to put a minute on the clock, like that almost never happens.
But it has happened before, and like that is, if the call was missed on the ice, that's, it happens, right? Like calls get missed all the time. Like it's one of these things where it's like you add these rules, you add these situations, and then it completely changes the way things are done in a way where people then complain about that. So to me, like I don't know, I'm just of the belief that humans, you have to kind of do one or the other, right? Like humans are infallible. So if you want to add technology to figure it out, add technology to figure it out. If you don't, or only go halfway and have this sort of middle ground, like, I don't know, I just see a situation where a minute passes before you take that back and put a minute back on the clock. Like, to me, that's kind of unacceptable. Like that, just the fact that it happened, it's just,
well, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah,
it's just that's an extreme situation. And also, like, I think as time progresses, there will be more and more technology that actually allows that to be called immediately. Like, it's not gotten to that point yet, and these are sort of extreme. That's just an extreme example in and of itself. So we'll see what they end up doing. But I think it's important to, if a play's offside, it's offside. You want to put in a rule where if you somehow have the puck after a minute and you're cycling it around in the offensive zone, that it doesn't matter anymore. I don't know. You could do that, but that just seems to complicate things more. I just think that as bad as it can be and as frustrating as it can be, I think it's important to just stick to the way it is right now. And as they get more tools to actually enforce or find those calls before they have to go through, as Jack Edwards put it, quantum physics hockey, then, well, I think it's important just to play out the game and then do the review.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I mean, I'm not super tied to the idea that I just threw out there. I honestly, like, with a lot of this stuff, I don't really care all that much. like people get into really intense conversations about it and like go really deep in this and like beg for rule changes, but I kind of enjoy watching it and I don't really care. But it is a little bit frustrating that there's this like, human error aspect that then is trying to be countered. But in doing so, it creates more complications. And I kind of enjoy, in a way, the uncertainty of a human aspect to being a referee or a linesman. Like, it's kind of insane, some of the stuff that they miss and and how they manage games and whatever you want to talk about. But I greatly enjoy the discourse because it's hilarious watching this happen from a distance. But anyway,
before we get on track, I also do want to mention, I feel like this has been the best year officiating wise. Like, I actually haven't been upset that often with officials this year, at least with my own team. Maybe it's because they're bad. They've played bad but like, I haven't been sitting at the TV watching the game and going, well, where was the penalty? And I use much worse language than that. And I scream because, I'm uncontrolled sometimes when I'm watching Leafs games because I'm very
It's true.
passionate.
You
But
are.
yeah, like I haven't. I think there's maybe been 2 times this year where I've been mad.
I think for me, again, this is just me, but I don't really have that much of a problem with refereeing in hockey, in the NHL at least, but it's the playoffs that really, really bugs me. Like the regular season refereeing, I think by and large is actually pretty solid. Like player safety is a separate topic, but generally, I think you're right. Like there are obviously missed calls here and there, but that's just going to happen. But I do think that like the playoffs are the problematic part with refereeing, like because it just
And as the
completely
season
the
goes, it
game
gets
completely
worse. I
yeah,
find.
and the game just completely changes. Like it's a totally different sport in in the postseason to me, and that's problematic. But I mean, I don't know. I think human error is a thing. If any of us were referees, I think it would be you'd immediately realize just how hard that job is. Like you go to a lot of Leafs games. I go to the rink once in a while. You see how fast the NHL is and how fast you have to make these calls and everything that goes along with that. And it's probably a extremely difficult job.
Oh, for
But
sure.
the playoffs are where I kind of go, okay, yeah, but like, come on, like,
Please
let's
call it. Please
yeah,
call it.
let's get a little bit more real here. Like, there are rules to
They
the
do
game,
call a
so
lot of
like,
penalties in the playoffs. Like they actually call more, generally speaking.
right,
It's just that, you know,
there are
what
more
becomes,
infractions.
yeah, and much more things that would be considered infractions in January aren't.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's
Right,
a good little
but anyways,
sideline.
yeah, it's a sideline topic. But we were talking about the Washington Capitals here.
We're
So number
bad.
one,
They're
they're
not good.
well, yeah. Charlie Lindgren has been a god. Darcy Kemper has been league average about like an 890. I think the league average save percentage this year is 899.
Is it
He's been like
really?
an eight. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well, last
incredible.
year, I think last year it was 895 or something.
I think it
I don't
ended
know.
at a 907. Like I actually think it ended at a
Oh, does it? I
907.
don't know. I
I'll
looked at
take a
Hockey
look.
Reference
I'll take a
today.
look.
I took a look at Hockey Reference today, and it's 899, I think, for league wide. And so Darcy Kemper's an 897, I think, and that's league average. He's 4-4-1. And Charlie Lindgren, I think, has been facing like 35 shots a night when he plays, and I think he has like a 925 save percentage. Which those two things in conjunction are extremely hard to maintain for an NHL level goaltender, especially when league average save percentage is 2 percentage points below that. Um, and I mean, look, the Washington Capitals have the worst power play in the league, and I don't think it's particularly close. Like I think they're sitting around 6%, and the next worst team is like 9. So they're not doing super well. And with the Capitals, I watched some of their power play because like, I think I mentioned this Monday night, but I'm fascinated now. I never, ever, ever for the draft watch special teams. I think people know that. But in the NHL, obviously, special teams are very, very important. And so I've been curious about, tactically speaking, what is going on with the Washington Capitals and that power play and why it's so poor. And it doesn't take very long to notice why and how the Capitals are outperforming so well because in a power play situation, you don't rely on your goaltender like at all ever. So Charlie Lindgren's out of the picture, and when he's out of the picture, the team seems to show a lot more of what they are. I mean, I noticed that their principal puck carriers are guys like Dylan Strome and Tom Wilson. And when you compare those guys to some of the other players in the league that are on the power play and quarterbacking, like the best power play in the league right now, I believe, is New Jersey, and that's Luke Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Jesper Bratt.
Jack Hughes, not Quinn.
Sorry, Jack Hughes. Right, my bad. There's too many Hugheses.
No, there isn't. They're
Three.
all
I know
awesome.
three.
They're all
Yes, that's
awesome.
true. They're all awesome. But the three of those guys around the perimeter and they sort of tactically dig around and look for seams and get the puck in front. It's just night and day compared to Tom Wilson trying to lug the puck over the offensive blue line and power it in himself and get the puck to Alex Ovechkin somehow. Um, and you know if it's not him, it's Dylan Strome and like I think and like Rasmus Sandin, as much as you love him, is
Yes.
probably not a power play one quarterback
Well,
guy. And John
has he
Carlson is
actually
also
been
there.
playing on Power Play One
He
though?
has, yeah, he's on the power play off and on from what I saw. John Carlson's on there a lot more, but
Yeah.
you've got Rasmus Sandin as your backup, and even John Carlson, I don't think has looked great. And I think he's a little older too. Like he's
He
on
is.
the older side. So, and I mean, I don't know. Do you want to dig into Alex Ovechkin a little bit because he's still their leading scorer. But I would say that's not saying much.
No, you said he had like 12 points this year, right?
Yeah, he's got 12 points in 19 games, and he's their leading scorer. Generally, when you've got a guy scoring like 2/3 of a point per game and he's your leading scorer, you're probably not doing
Doing
super
much,
well.
especially in the more recent high scoring NHL we've seen the past couple of years. Like there are guys cracking almost 100-point seasons now.
Yeah, like Trevor Moore, point a game. Frank Vetrano, point a game through 20 games. Like there's a lot of point per game guys where you're like, oh, and Alex Ovechkin is no longer one of them. So, and again, watching the Washington power play, you would expect that they'd be pretty decent because they have Alex Ovechkin out there, but
that's the one. That's the lone weapon. Teams can easily take that option away.
Yes,
like they take more so now, especially because they don't move with speed. It's not like they have Nikita Kucherov with these crazy one-touch passes. Like I saw that power play live against the Leafs in that game where the Leafs, what was it? They came back from 4-1 down, whatever it was. Yeah. It was crazy.
Crazy. It was silly.
But like, I counted to 5 when Nikita Kucherov touched the puck. And I'm like, okay, this is going in 5 seconds, and they literally put the puck in the back of the net after I got down to 0.
Yeah.
Because he's just ridiculous with it. Washington doesn't have that. They're just hoping that Ovi is going to get a 1T and put it in the back of the net. And he's not been doing that so much this year.
Granted, one name that surprised me on that team that I've really liked is Connor McMichael.
He's been good.
That's a guy who I think does bring a bit of that, but he's not Nikita Kucherov, right? Like he's kind of there, but in the same, it's an echo kind of. And so the thing with Ovechkin, like, I mean, you hate to just call it a career, but he did not look like a major factor. And it's not just like, oh, the team's not as good anymore, so he has nobody to play with.
No,
it's
he's not as good. He's really not as good.
He's much heavier, not physically. I mean, like he's just playing much heavier. The shot's still good, but he's on pace for 20 goals this year, right? Like he'd have to get to 40, right, which he did last year. He's going to have to score 35 goals in 60 games, which that's tough, like for anybody, let alone a 38-year-old who has not much of a supporting cast. So I don't know. I mean, look, goaltenders have performed at this kind of level for stretches of like almost an entire season and like kept their team alive. Like Jose Theodore back in the day when he won the Hart Trophy. The Montreal Canadiens were a pretty decent team then, but he kind of like really carried them. It's possible. But also, like, Charlie Lindgren's been a solid goalie, but is he this, right? Like forever. And it just, I don't know. Like if you look,
do not believe he's Igor Shesterkin and is going to carry the Rangers in. And even then, the Rangers had, like, Panarin wasn't as good that season and their guys weren't as good, but like they were still good enough to squeak in. Like when you look at the teams that are behind Washington in the standings for a wild card spot or even just in the Metropolitan, are the New Jersey Devils going to miss the playoffs this year?
Right.
I don't think
Probably
so.
Not. I don't think so.
I think they replace Washington for sure. Do I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are better than the Washington Capitals? Yeah, I do. I really do. And then when you get into the wild card talk about the other teams, so currently in the Atlantic, Boston, Florida, and Toronto occupied the top 3 spots. I like Detroit and Tampa better than I like Washington. Like I just don't see the Washington Capitals being able to sustain what's been going on here, especially if their guys aren't producing at the rate that, not that they should be, but at a decent enough rate to keep them afloat.
I mean, here's all you need to know, really, as well. Like they're 7-2-1 in their last 10, which is great. But over the course of the season, they have 46 goals in 19 games. In the entire Eastern Conference, the next lowest scoring team is the Islanders, and they have 56 goals so far this year in 2 more games. So unless the Washington Capitals score 5 goals in both of the next 2 games, they're the lowest scoring team, it seems, in the Eastern Conference, and yet they're sitting there in a playoff spot. And they're also, I believe, they have the fewest goals against in the entire Eastern Conference. So I don't know. I feel like something's got to give. I'll plug Scouching.ca as well. We have a Tableau visualization of what I call outperformance metrics. So who is outperforming their expected results the most or least. And Charlie Lindgren is just pinned on both categories of just outperforming in general on the ice. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But they're going to be an interesting one to watch. And they're on that island with Toronto and Carolina of probably should be doing worse than they are, but here they are 20 games in.
But Toronto and Carolina, I have a lot more faith in to figure it out.
Totally. So I guess on that note, we should flip the script and go to a team that is blowing our minds, both of us, I think, to this point this year, in the LA Kings.
Oh, yeah.
I can't get enough of them this year. I can't get enough of watching the LA Kings. I started watching them early in the year, and again, I'm trying to watch more NHL.
Who definitely deserved to win last night against the Washington Capitals.
100%. I only went and
outshot by more than double.
Yeah, it was not even close. Now, I mean, where do you want to start with the LA Kings?
Quinton Byfield. Quinton Byfield.
Yeah, okay. Quinton Byfield. Yeah, I mean, he's been a big step in the right direction. But like Adrian Kempe and Anze Kopitar on that line together.
Kem Fiala is a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're just firing on every cylinder right now. Even though I just saw this, even though they have a bunch of players like at or near a point a game, so no one is like blowing the roof off of the league. But the overall results for that top unit of Kempe, Kopitar, Byfield with Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty on the back end, like they're just they're dominant. Like Vladislav Gavrikov is even another guy who
he's been really
some
good.
People seem to like, other people seem to not be huge on, but he's also really good. Like the LA Kings have the top penalty kill last I checked, and that's another one that I watched. And Gavrikov is such a huge part of that. Like,
and they're insulating Cam Talbot to a level where you're getting really, really good goaltending because of how well he's insulated.
And it just goes to show why I look in my work, like why I look at skating as so important, especially in the modern NHL. Like it's not so much speed, but like the thing that about the Kings on, especially on the penalty kill, that you notice, like on defensive entries, that's kind of where your penalty kill really makes a huge difference. Is how often can you block that blue line transition and cause a little bit of chaos and maybe cause a turnover and fire the puck into their end again. And one thing that they do is they have really mobile guys on their penalty kill, and that includes a guy like Gavrikov. And at the blue line, they'll clog where the puck is entering with three guys. Like they'll triple team the lane where the puck is coming into their own zone, and then they'll have one defenseman sort of monitoring the middle of the ice to sort of catch any strays and catch that sort of lateral pass to enter the defensive zone. And it works. Like it works so often. The amount of time, and if they miss, the guys are mobile and skilled enough to pivot, change directions, and keep chasing the play down and get set up in their box. So it's just such an important thing that I keep an eye out for, that all of these guys seem to do on the Kings. And again, they all seem to buy in. They all seem to play for each other as a unit. They're passing the puck really well. They're creative, especially that top unit. You mentioned Kevin Fiala. He's another one. Quinton Byfield has taken a big step this year. He's a guy where I feel like he's still not clicked fully, especially with his goal scoring. Like I remember him scoring goals in junior with his shot quality and his ability just to get to the net that should translate. And he's only at 4 goals this year. And I feel like he probably could get over 20, but that's not what he's on pace for.
Yeah. What's awesome is that there is another level to Quinton Byfield that I think is still yet to be unlocked. And if he ends up being the player that we thought he was really going to be, like, or really could be, then this LA Kings team is going to be really, really tough to deal with in the playoffs.
Rick Vive didn't like what you had to say. He just threw his microphone down a bit. So well, he seems to be upset, so we'll let him cool down a little, I think, after that.
Okay.
But he must not be a fan of Quinton Byfield. I don't know what that's all about. But in any case, he's a guy also, we want to talk about him a little bit more in future episodes because there's a lot to dig into with Quinton Byfield. But just because we're talking about how the Kings kind of work, based on what I've seen, he's such a fascinating example of finding out what a player does well and putting them in a situation to sort of maximize that. Like Quinton Byfield off puck is a monster this year. Like his ability to chase guys down, close gaps, even, and he's not even super physical. He uses his reach to turn the play around, find options, move the puck. It's all really, really good. His puck carrying, like quarterbacking a transition, not really a strong suit at this level, at least not right now. But once the puck is in the offensive zone and he's playing with guys like Kempe and Kopitar who can move the puck around along with Byfield, and if they ever drop a pass and screw up, Byfield is right there to sort of chase that down, close that gap, and try to keep the offensive possession going. And he's really, really good at it. And so is Kopitar. So he's a really good example of that as well, just finding something that the players can really do well and really putting them in a position to maximize it. I just saw someone comment as well that Carl Grundstrom has 7 goals this year. I think he's one of the league leaders in expected goals for percentage this year for similar reasons to Byfield, like just grinding play down, chasing play down, keeping it simple, utilizing line mates. Like there's a lot of guys on the team who kind of buy into that style of play. Guys like Philip Deneau, Trevor Moore has been having a great year as well.
I miss him on the Leafs, man.
But I bet you do. Yeah.
They got Muzzin out of that, and it was worth it for the time.
Fair enough. I mean, Blake Lizotte is another one that's kind of like that, who I've always kind of liked. Mikey Anderson.
So they're just really good, yeah.
Yeah, like they're just a well-constructed, good hockey team.
Unlike the next team we're going to talk about.
Well, yeah, unlike the Edmonton Oilers. So we're gonna just, be nice, try to be nice.
But Will, I'm not a nice person. You know this.
Well, I know, but good cop, bad cop. Okay, can we agree on good cop, bad cop?
Sure.
Okay, so the good. Connor McDavid has 15 points in his last 5 games. That's silly, just on its own. They're 5-3 under Chris Knobloch, so that's also good. But what are the things that have actually changed with them? So last night I watched a game where they played the Predators before Woodcroft got fired. And then they played a game against I can't remember. It was the most recent game the Oilers have played, I think.
This is Golden Knights, right?
Yeah, the Vegas game against with Knobloch behind the bench. And so we'll get into some of the stuff that I noticed then, but in general, like they just seem to be regressing. Like they were one of the biggest underperforming teams in the league. Again, something you can find out with the Scouching.ca subscription. They were one of the most underperforming teams, and they couldn't buy a save at the beginning of the year. It was a disaster in that area, but they were driving good results. There was a lot of potential for offense, especially there. Their defensive play has been also quite poor, but the offensive play certainly was there. They just weren't getting the goals. And now they're getting the goals. Like their goals for percentage, I think, has gone up 7% from 41 to 49. That's 8% in the time before and after. And in general, their possession has stayed relatively the same. Like the shot attempt differentials have gone down. They've gotten a little bit worse, but in general, like they're basically the same team. They're just saving the puck about the same amount, but the puck's going in more. So I don't know. I mean, the team play has kind of gotten a little bit maybe safer, I would say, based on watching them before and after. I think they're playing a little bit more east-west hockey, sort of playing with the puck a little bit more rather than sort of what I found before, where it was like sending their offensive players really far into the neutral zone and really trying to stretch the ice north-south and that dump and chase style. But I felt like they were one of these teams that they wanted to play that dump and chase physical style, but most of those guys, not most, I should say, but like the depth guys don't really have the speed that's necessary to do that in the modern era. But they do have guys like Evander Kane and even Mikey McLeod. Is it Mike McLeod?
Yeah.
Or is it Ryan?
Or no, it's Ryan.
Yeah.
It's Ryan.
It's Ryan McLeod. Yeah. So he's the speedster too, who can sort of get in there and bump and grind. So I don't know. Watching the Oilers was very interesting, both before and after Woodcroft. I mean, I think both of us would agree, though. Woodcroft probably didn't need to go.
No, I don't think he needed to go.
It was just sort of
a
like
message send. That's all. He's the scapegoat.
Yeah, it was just like, well, it should be working, but it's not, so we're going to mix it up. Which I don't know. I was talking to someone the other day who works in the sport, and they come from the European world. So if there are any European viewers right now, this is going to be interesting for you. He said, so he has experience working in Europe, and he was basically telling me that they're a lot more understanding and liberal and careful with their staffing. So here in North America, you could be gone like that, right? Like 7 or 8 game stretch where it's just not going right and you're out. And on one hand, I get it. It's the National Hockey League. There's billions of dollars at stake, and like you got to have a good team. But that often doesn't mean you have a good team just because you make a change, right? Like just change for the sake of change isn't always a good thing. And in Europe, it seems to be very much the opposite, where sometimes owners believe too much in the people that they put in positions to put teams together and coach teams and everything. Like Mark Crawford, I feel like has been the head coach of Zurich for years. Not that he's been a bad coach there, but like they like to stick with their guys, and the NHL is just not like that. So with the Oilers, like the fact that they're doing a little bit better to me is not a surprise. But there's plenty of research out there that I remember studying when I was in university that coaching changes generally, and this is, I think, if I recall correctly, like across sports, coaching changes generally provide a short-term boost to results, but then you just regress back to the sort of talent level that you're naturally settled in at. So are the Oilers as bad as they were to start the year? I don't think so. I think they're sort of correcting themselves, but I still
Or Connor
feel like
McDavid is correcting himself,
Yes.
and that's really what it feels like.
Yes, it is. And like because watching them before and after the Woodcroft thing, I don't know, maybe there are Oilers fans who've seen more of them than I have, but it seems like a lot of things are relatively the same.
Evan Bouchard still can't defend. He really can't.
Yeah, and yeah, he can't.
Darnell Nurse is making way too much money for what he is.
Well, Darnell Nurse I found Darnell Nurse fascinating to watch. Again, that's another player where I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to specifically watching him play hockey over the years. And I don't know, man. Like that.
But he's not what a 9.5, I think it's $9.5 million defenseman should look like. Because even Cale Makar makes less money than that.
Which is bananas to me. Like that's insanity. And I mean, I see why NHL teams would look at a Darnell Nurse and go, this guy's a $9.5 million defenseman. He'll stand you up. He'll hit you. He'll punch you in the head. He'll block you out in front of the net. But the thing that bugs me about stuff like that is I found a lot of times over the last little while, like a guy like that, you know, Eric Branson, not saying they're equal, but like I was watching Columbus earlier this year, and Eric Branson is also in a similar vein of you can tie guys up in front of the net. Sure. Take your stick off the ice and wrap it around another man. Sure. But all it takes is for you to shove them away from you 8 inches, or just they get away from you 8 inches. Your stick's not on the ground. Theirs gets to the ice first, and their stick gets on the puck first, and it's in the back of the net. Like, it's one thing to literally be mauling a guy, but there's more to it than that. And I think smart players can sort of go, okay, like I know what I'm going to get from Darnell Nurse, so how can I counter him?
Especially fast ones. Like, they won't even get tied up the same way.
No. Like, and he's a guy that I find can get beat wide, like a lot of big, heavy physical defenders. But again, I used Eric Goodbranson as an example, but Eric Goodbranson is significantly worse.
He's more like Vinny Desharnais. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, dude. I don't know how, again, if you're a Leaf fan and you're like convinced that the Leafs defense is atrocious, like get out of your bubble and watch the Oilers and just see like Evan Bouchard and Vincent Desharnais. They've got another one there.
Cody Ceci, who's on the second pair.
Cody Ceci was not
like
great.
What? Brett Kulak is decent.
Kulak's okay.
Yeah, he's decent.
Okay.
But like Cody Ceci and Darnell Nurse is your second pair.
Yeah,
that ain't gonna cut it. And then when you factor in the goaltending situation, like I think the Oilers' goaltending have got a lot of flack, and deservedly so to an extent, but the defense is really, really bad. Really, really bad.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
It really amplifies the problem. Like, and I'm going to go back to the Leafs because that's all I know, evidently. But think about how the Leafs did with Jack Campbell in that. That was when the Leafs had good defense. They
Right.
insulated Jack Campbell. Now, Jack Campbell had an amazing month in November in 2021, 22, I want to say it was.
Yep, he was. Yep.
But after that, it was them insulating Jack Campbell. And the Oilers don't have that. They can't insulate Stuart Skinner and Jack Campbell and Calvin Pickard. They can't do it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, what they did do that I kind of like, because I'm overwhelmingly biased towards this player, is Sam Gagner. They went out and just kind of got him, which is cool. I like Sam Gagner. He's one of these guys that I would love to have on the show because he's a guy that I think always was really, really good, but never, he was on those really terrible Oilers teams early in his career. And then he just bounced around from team to team to team to team. But the whole way he was scoring 40 or 50 points. So I want to put him on the board of guys I want to bring on the show. Number one is for me, Brad Hunt. That's right there. Brad Hunt, former Edmonton Oiler. So it's somewhat topical. But just the guys who bounced around and were good the whole time. And watching him with the Oilers this year, like he's not the same player, but he's been a nice jab in the arm for them because guys like James Hamblin, guys like who else has been playing? Like even Ryan McLeod is fast, but not doing a whole lot. He's a nice jolt in the arm. Dylan Holloway has not come along as expected. So are the Oilers a good team? Well, they've got great players. Like they've got some great players, but just based on going from one game to the next, watching them this past week, it's not really, it's just a bit of a troubling situation for them because I don't know how much has really changed except for things that should have happened with Woodcroft are now happening.
And I also see that there's a comment about the defensive underlying numbers not being as bad. It's just like, from what I see with my eyes, it is very bad. And I'm not going to deny certain analytics, but it's just like Evan Bouchard just gets walked and does stuff where he just can't handle NHL forecheckers. And there's a lot of those guys who just can't handle it.
And context plays a big, because that's true. Like what that comment says is absolutely true. And their goaltending, you can't win with an 876 goaltender.
Nope.
You just can't.
You cannot.
So that's a problem. But the other thing too is, like you said, the Oilers are kind of a team of like haves and have-nots. Like there's some guys on that team who are some of the best in the world, undeniably. But
the best in the world when it comes to Connor McDavid.
Sure. And when they're not on the ice, they're not a playoff team.
They're like the Minnesota Wild. That's kind of what they are.
So the goaltending has been very poor, but I will say it depends on who's on the ice, right? Like their defensive metrics are team wide, but a guy like Matthias Ekholm has been great in his own end this year, from what I've seen.
He's been playing hurt too.
Yeah, Brett Kulak also pretty decent in his own end, fine. But when
it's just like
Evan
how
Bouchard.
Oh, I'll let you go.
I was gonna say when a guy like Evan Bouchard's on the ice, like you're gonna get points out of him, but it doesn't take very long to look at what happens when he's on the ice specifically, and even a Darnell Nurse, I think, is part of that crew. It's just they're allowing those chances that are in tight, and when they're not on the ice, a guy like Ekholm or even if McDavid or whatever, like that, those units are on the ice. Evander Kane, it's not as bad. It's much better actually. So they're just this very, very strange team as they're built. So
I don't think they're that strange at all. They're all Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and kind of like they've got some decent other players, but beyond that, they're just not like the LA Kings are complete. Like in a lot of ways, they're just a full unit that play together and play well. The Florida Panthers are a team that have a style that's really punishing. They're physical, they're fast, they forecheck, they're deactivates and really pressures opponents. The Edmonton Oilers are Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl putting points in the back of the net and hoping that they don't get scored on as much as the other team. Right. And that's kind of the way it goes with them.
Well, I mean, season's still early. You got 60 more games to go. We'll see what happens. But I think that closes it up for the NHL stuff we had planned. But we should move on to some of the questions that are coming in because it seems like there's quite a few. Let me just I got to go back all the way to the start here and take a look. I mean, right off the bat, someone talking about Herman Truff propaganda. I mean, I'm all for it. I largely support Herman Truff propaganda. So, David, you got a fan in me. So, great question early on from Blue Science. Getting a quick question before next class. So enjoy watching this later. Who is Liam Greentree, and why and how is he leading the OHL draft eligibles in points? So I think Sam and I mentioned this on Monday night, but the Windsor Spitfires this year have been sad, very, very sad. Like I think I looked this up, but last I checked, they were amongst the worst OHL teams in the last decade and a half. Like, not good. And I mean, I don't have advanced knowledge of how the OHL teams are looking going into this season, but I didn't think they were going to be this bad. But Liam Greentree caught my eye last year quite a bit, and this year in the Holinka tournament where he wasn't playing a ton. But like, Greentree is that sort of like, if you're, AJ, you're a Leafs guy. Like, if you watch a Matthew Nyes, Liam Greentree is kind of up that alley. An extremely positive example would be like a Jaromir Jagr, where the speed is not quite there. When you watch him, you sort of go, this guy doesn't look like he's putting everyone on their heels. He's not Connor McDavid out there. So how the hell does he have points on 55% of Windsor's goals, and he's a point and a half a game and like dominating on his team? And then you sort of pay more attention a little bit and you go, oh, it's because nobody can touch him. And every single time someone gets on top of him, he finds a way to get the puck off the boards, get the puck to someone else, shove off a guy, shove the pressure off and get into better position. And he's also got skill. Like, he's a skilled guy with a really good shot, and really good vision. Like, just the sort of, you got him pinned him along the boards, he'll find a way to get the puck to the front of the net. And that's just what he does. So that's basically it. Like, I think he's a first round prospect for this year. He's well into my first round. I think more and more people are putting him there. It's almost undeniable how good he's been because of how bad Windsor is and what his results have been. But he's a really fascinating player, like, and not the typical one that I always would go for, but he's so good at what he does that you can kind of just sit there and go, yep, that's exactly the type of player that could work in the NHL for sure. And I hate to say it, but that playoff style player. The next question came in about the 3 first-round draft picks that St. Louis made in last year's NHL draft. So if I'm pulling up the page now, refreshing my memory. So they took Dalibor Dvorsky at 10, Otto Stenberg at 25.
And then what, Lindstein?
And Lindstein, yeah. So Theo Lindstein at 29. So I have seen a little bit of all of these guys this year. To me, Theo Lindstein is still Theo Lindstein. Like, he has been doing pretty well in the Allsvenskan, or Hockey Allsvenskan, I should say, not the Allsvenskan. Mikael Holm, who I saw in the chat, is going to yell at me. But in Hockey Allsvenskan, he's been solid. And last year, generally, he was solid. So that's kind of what the Blues drafted. That's probably what they're getting. I wouldn't say he's outperformed or underperformed based on what I saw last year of him. So whatever. Stenberg. So if you look at Otto Stenberg's production, it hasn't been phenomenal. And he kind of plays this style of play where, yeah, he might come and go. But the talent is undeniable, and he's producing in the SHL a little bit. He's not playing a ton of minutes, but he's doing quite well from what I've seen, which is relatively limited, but he's still Otto Stenberg. High pace, high skill, creative, trying things, and, should get more productive as time goes on. And then there's Dalibor Dvorsky at 10, who I did not have in my first round last year. And watching him in the SHL this year, I mean, you can kind of see why if you watched any of that tape. I mean, he was earning fewer and fewer minutes on a team that's at the bottom of the table, I believe, in Sweden in the SHL, and ended up leaving. And I know there's been an article out there where he's been quoted by saying, "Oh, I wasn't really getting the opportunity, and it wasn't really working out, and we didn't vibe. So I just want to come to North America and get my feet back in under me and play in Sudbury and have some fun." And I mean, look, he's a guy who always I felt was going to produce against junior competition. He's bigger than them. He's got a better shot than most of them. But projecting him as an NHL player to me is a struggle. It's a struggle. He's just not a super high pace guy. There's not a ton of skill. Like under high pressure situations and high pace situations like the SHL, for example, even at the Hockey Allsvenskan level last year, he was getting his gaps closed down constantly and didn't really have the problem solving ability to get through it enough. And to me, drafting him at 10 was optimistic. And watching him with Sudbury, like he's producing, right? You give him the puck, he can shoot it in the net. Um, it just remains to be seen if that footwork and skating and skill level can get to the point where it'll be a difference maker in the NHL. Because being a top 10 pick in the NHL draft, especially considering some of the players that went in the next, I'd say, I don't know, 20 picks, how they are, um, you kind of need to be a difference maker. So we'll see what happens with them. But I mean, I would say like Stenberg's doing fine, Lindstein's doing fine, and Dvorsky is a bit rocky, but again, like kind of is the player that I expected him to be in the SHL because last year he struggled against men a lot. So next question that we saw was
David Jiricek.
David Jiricek. Yeah. So have I been able to watch David Jiricek and has he been struggling? So I have here and there. I don't think he's struggling, but the job he's responsible for in the NHL is not easy. He's always been a guy since he was drafted, and I mentioned this many times, where he wants to play very physical and he just doesn't really have the strength to do it yet. I think his skating is really, really solid for a guy like him. If he keeps things simple, simple passes, first pass, D to D, I think he's been solid. I don't think he's been struggling, but definitely a learning curve, I think, with him. And again, like he's a good reason, he's a good example of why defensemen can take a little bit longer to develop in a lot of cases, because his job is quite difficult and it's quite a step up from what he was doing even in the AHL, right? Like AHL to NHL is not as big a step, but it is still quite big. What else? Yuri Pekarchik. I can't remember where I had Pekarchik ranked last year. I feel like it was like in the late second, early third, something like that. I thought the hype train about him going into the draft was a little bit nutty. I like Pekarchik, and I've seen him in the USHL a little bit this year, but he's always been sort of a guy with potential and not a ton of really like needle moving talent yet. Once in a while you see flashes of really good skill. He's a big kid. There's a lot to like, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, he was drafted. Where was he drafted? I don't remember. Let me just look it up. Pekarchik. So he went 76th. I mean, based on that spot in the draft, I mean, you and I both loved Idar Suniev last year. He went very shortly after.
We both loved Idar. All hail God King Idar.
All hail God King. Like Jaden Perron and Denver Barkey were picks at the end of that round. So would I have picked him there? Probably not. But I mean, you give him a few more years and I'm sure things will be okay with him. He's fine. He's one of those guys where it's fine. Oh, someone said, okay, so the clarification was Adam Jiricek. So I don't know if we really want to do that. I mean, we talked about him a bit on Monday. I still like him because of the potential he shows. He's a different player than his brother. But I will admit, yeah, he's kind of struggled a little bit in the Czech Pro League. But again, it's a big jump for him. He wasn't, playing a ton of minutes. He's still not playing a ton of minutes, and it's a bit difficult. But we'll see. It's still early in the year, but yeah, he's been one that's been up and down, but I still love the potential of that player. The next question from Griggle McFiggle. I hope that's your real name. Is this draft lackluster because I'm having trouble getting interested? I wouldn't say it's lackluster, but it's not nearly as exciting. I think there's a lot of interesting players in this year's draft, and Sam and I were talking a little bit about this last on Monday, and there's a lot of interesting players who show nice flashes or certain areas of the game where there's really interesting talent. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd say like every year, generally about 20 guys are guys that really excite me. And this year, that number isn't as high. There's a lot of names that interest me, but in terms of when I sit down and watch them play hockey, they're not like the most engaging, right? Like even Adam Jiricek, who is a guy that's really high on my board, but mostly because of like, well, you see what he could be, but he's not that yet. You know, Cole Iserman even is a guy who everyone has locked in the top 3. And when I watch him, I'm going, okay, like I see why he's highly valued, but he's going to have, if he is what he is now, you know, in the NHL, he's going to have holes in his game.
And,
but he
just
is
quickly mentioning,
young.
you actually did miss a question about Cole Iserman that precedes this. So
well,
you can expand on that right after.
We're getting 2 birds stoned at once here then. Because he's a guy.
2 birds stoned at once.
He's a guy who, you know, you can see the talent. He can shoot with the best of them. And he skates pretty well, but often, in my view, has looked quite disengaged at times, a little bit careless with the puck. It's difficult for me to trust guys who score a lot of goals and don't have a ton of assists unless I am given reason to believe otherwise. Rick Vive might know a thing or two about that, being a 50 goal scorer. But in any case, all due respect, Rick, by the way, I know he's still upset. The mic hasn't gone back to where it was, but that's okay. We're still learning. But I mean, yeah, like with regards to this draft, like it doesn't take very long for me to go, okay, like this guy's okay, but there are issues, and this guy's fine, but it's a project, right? Like Silyev and Sam Dickinson even are guys where I'm going, okay, I see stuff there, but it's not, you know, fully baked in what they're gonna be, and that's okay. But it's just different this year, and there's a lot of interesting cases in my late first through mid second where I'm going, okay, like under normal circumstances, would this player be ranked as highly on my board as they are? Probably not, but they're interesting nonetheless, and who knows what they'll be. Okay, someone asked about Bogdan Konyushkov and why is he the best defenseman?
Don't forget to mention their name, Lobster Mania.
Lobster Mania, yeah. Watch
with a lobster emoji. Okay.
Yes, so Bogdan Konyushkov, I've watched a bit of him. I watched a bit of him last year. He's fine. I'm just pulling up the names that Montreal drafted last year because I don't remember. And I feel like they drafted like 5 goalies. They did. They drafted 3 goalies. And oh yeah, okay. So I forgot. The underlying joke I think in that question is that David Reinbacher was one of the other defensemen they drafted last year. And I think I saw a couple of questions about
there was a question about David Reinbacher. I think it's later.
We'll get to him later. But I mean, Bogdan Konyushkov is fine. Like he's doing fine. I don't think he's got like super high end NHL potential. You know, he's playing a lot on the power play there, and just hasn't really like, you know, he's gonna be 21. He's under contract until 2026. So at that point, he'll be 23. Could he? I don't know. It's you can't say never, and it's a 4th round draft pick, right? So we'll see what happens. But he's never been a guy where I'm like, oh my god, this guy is an absolute steal. He's an absolute gem. Like I know you look at his NHLE, you look at all this stuff, and he's going to look great. But he's fine.
NHL is a load of crap. It really is for the most part.
You said that, not me. You said that.
But am I wrong? Am I really wrong when I say that? Exactly.
Not really. Yeah, not really.
It's a load of crap, just like power play points.
Exactly. There you go. Now we're talking. Can I wax poetic about Berkeley Catton? I mean, sure, briefly. I really like Berkeley Catton. I think he's one of the smartest players in the draft, one of the most selfless players in the draft. But again, he's another one of these guys where you watch him and you go, okay, like if he goes 3rd overall, is he a game-breaking NHL player? I'm not sure that happens right away. Not that it usually happens right away, but I think there's a bit of a longer way to go to get to that point for him, just because of the physical resilience and the skating level. It's just not quite that next level that you really need to be one of those top level NHL players. But the brains are there. He's got good brains. And there's a lot of really nice pieces there. I think he's in my top 5 right now. So which I don't think is too controversial. You know, and there he's part of, like Sam and I were discussing the other night. There's like a group of 10-ish after Macklin Celebrini where it's like you could argue based on what you're looking for that this guy deserves to go before this guy, or this guy deserves to go before this guy, and we should bank on this and this and this, and you could just do that forever. and still probably end up with kind of what you're expecting. And Berkeley Catton, I think, is part of that group. But I mean, for a puck transporting quarterback and just a smart puck mover and all that fun stuff, yeah, he's certainly right up there. Do you think Kyle Johnson, Kent Johnson, will get a better role after his AHL stint in Cleveland?
Let's hope. Let's hope.
I mean, yeah, you got to hope. I don't know right off the bat if he is. I watched Kent Johnson in the AHL and I watched him in the NHL, and like again, he's still Kent Johnson, right? Like you see the skill level, right? Like you see it, but there are other things that nullify that skill that other teams do, right? Like I still think there's a little bit too much hesitation in his game. I think there's a little bit too much, overhandling and a little bit too much overthinking and trying to be like a bit of hero puck going on. But that doesn't mean he's bad. Like he was very good in the AHL game that I watched, but the NHL is not the AHL. So I think he needs to be put in a position where he has other players to play with that can sort of work off of him with the puck and guys that he can set up to be a shot threat.
Like an
And
Adam
he's also
Fantilli, maybe.
like Adam Fantilli, and like Yegor Chinikov is another one who, maybe you see what happens with those guys together. So I mean, you got to hope that he gets better. I mean, it's not he's not a bad hockey player. And I knew, I have long records of me saying that Ken Johnson might take some time to get to where he could be, and he was not a not productive player last year either. But I mean, it is also kind of strange to me that there are players on Columbus where it seems like they're being played in NHL minutes and they're just learning on the fly. David Jiricek is one but then they're not extending the same thing to Kent Johnson. So I don't have any information on exactly why that is.
Probably because Jiricek is huge and Johnson is
Yeah.
not. And he
Probably.
plays defense.
Probably. Yeah, you're
It's just
probably
the old things. The old habits dying hard.
right. Okay, so where are we at with Gradinin? Still high on him or has he stalled? I still really liked Vladimir Gradinin. I think that the big thing with him was that he wasn't a super quick player, very mobile and great footwork, but not super quick. And that's still an issue, but he's still getting really good results. Like he's not scoring points, but he's getting good results in the KHL. He's getting many more minutes now with Sharapovets. So I'm curious. I can't give you a ton of detail on the answer because I've only watched him a little bit this year just to check in on him and Timur Mukanov, who's a teammate of his. And Gradinin, he's still Vladimir Gradinin, good strengths in his game, but some holes that, he requires some support to get over. And maybe that'll change, but we'll see. I still would have drafted him where I drafted him. Like him being a 6th round draft pick, he's doing pretty well. Thoughts on Nate Danielson and Axel Sandin-Pellikka? Danielson was impressive offensively in Wings camp. So Nate Danielson, again, a guy with flaws last year. I was a little surprised to see him be drafted as high as he went. But like similar to, say, the Blues, who we were talking about earlier, if you had drafted Dvorsky where you drafted Stenberg and Stenberg where you drafted Dvorsky, it's kind of a wash, right? Like that would be fine. So if you had Sandin-Pellikka where Danielson got drafted and Danielson where Sandin-Pellikka got drafted, I mean, I guess that's okay. I had Danielson like I think in the late 20s, early 30s on my list. And I always felt that his game was a little bit limited and just not very diverse and inconsistent. And I think that's still kind of the case. I mean, the Brandon Wheat Kings are not a great team this year. And I don't think their style of play really lends itself to developing super high-end NHL players. But Danielson, I think, has kind of stagnated, and he's also older for the draft class. So, again, it's kind of he's playing around what I expected based on where I had him ranked last year. And I don't know. I still feel like there were better options in the draft based on how he's played. But, I mean, I feel like he's going to look good in a rookie camp because of what a good straight line skater he is. He's pretty smart with the puck. There's stuff there to work with. And when he's playing really, really well, there's good stuff there. It's just you don't see it that much. Thoughts? Okay, so we could talk. I mean, Ryan Rubrick is he the young one or is Dylan the young one? Ryan Rubrick, is he the 07? Yeah, so Ryan Rubrick is the 2026 draft eligible, playing for the Niagara Ice Dogs. I mean, the kid can shoot. And I'll say this again, like he is part of the goals more than assists club. And when you watch him play, you can absolutely see why. Like he's not a particularly good skater. He's a heavy-footed guy. He's gigantic. So you're hoping that the development curve is just delayed. I mean, he's got 10 goals in 19 games this year, which is great, but he's got 4 assists. And Niagara has a couple of those guys. Kevin He is a guy who I think he has 11 goals and like 2 assists this year. Like they just have guys who, if you get them the puck, they can shoot it, which is great. Rubrick is just a guy where I'm like, okay, you know, is he the next Nick Ritchie, right? Like a big guy who can score in junior because he can shoot, and then the rest of it is a bit of a mixed bag.
And then Nick Kyprios will suggest that he should be traded for William Nylander.
Nailed it.
Yes.
Thoughts on the episode of Survivor? I can do this quick because I love Survivor, and last night's episode was completely unhinged and insane. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Survivor forever, but I loved it. This season 45, incredible. And I know you say to people, oh, they're in their 45th season, and they go, how the hell is that possible? But it didn't take long for me to fall in love with Survivor, and I'm stuck in that world. And this season, after a couple of, I would say, quasi duds, they've extended the episodes to 90 minutes. They've added a lot more strategic stuff rather than like game show kind of stuff, and just interpersonal relationships and stuff. And it's way, way cooler than it was the last few years, and much more similar to sort of the golden era, you could call it. But also the cast is great this season. And last night's episode, I mean, obviously I'm not going to spoil anything, but it was really fantastic. And after a couple of really, really good ones.
You know what's crazy about Survivor?
No, I don't.
Well, it first aired when my mother was pregnant with me.
Oh, Jesus, man. Don't say that.
Yeah, it did. It did.
Well, I remember watching season 1 when I was a kid on TV. I mean, everybody was watching it. Like, I don't know, because you were not born yet.
Not quite, no.
You literally were not born yet. And it's hard to articulate, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers may not have been alive either. Like, it was insane. It was like a cultural turning point. Like, before that point, there was only really like one reality show, and it was an MTV show that was kind of popular, but like it was much more geared towards like teenagers kind of thing. But this was like, we're going to take people and put them on an island with cameras and just see what happens. And they all have to vote each other out. And it's like, that was like mind blowing to most people. Like it like, I think 30 million people were watching it like every week. And it was like this whole thing. So it's really hard to explain without having lived through it, just how important that show was at the time. And the fact that it's still going boggles my mind. But and the fact that it's still good. I mean, it wasn't good every season, but it's still going pretty strong. It's always pretty. It's an incredible thing that they're doing.
It's pretty crazy that Jeff Probst has survived the entire time as well.
Literally, almost. Yeah. Like he hasn't been bitten by a snake or something.
Or been canceled like so many other show hosts.
That's true. That's true.
He is truly the sole survivor.
He is. He is. And he looks the same age almost.
I know, it's crazy.
It's a little crazy. Okay, we got a question about Brock Faber. Brock Faber's a guy that we also want to profile on the show sometime in the future, but I watched him too because he's probably a guy that sneakily could be, if I had one, on a Calder ballot. Like not top 3, I would say, but like one of those 4 or 5 guys. He's just an outstanding defenseman.
There's
like
so many good guys this year, though. That's what's crazy. So many good Calder guys.
But he's a guy that I think I would sneak on at like the tail end of my ballot, just because he needs recognition for, like we were talking about David Juracek and how difficult the job is to be that type of defenseman. Yet there's Brock Faber, and the mobility, again, it's the mobility that matters so much with him. He's big, yeah, but he's not really using it physically. He's using it in conjunction with his feet, closing gaps, tying sticks up, getting pucks turned around, like just a lot of really solid stuff. I don't know if he's ever going to score a tremendous amount of points, but who cares? Like he's, you know, if the Oilers have Darnell Nurse, and paying him $9.5 million, the Minnesota Wild should be paying him at least $9 million. Like he's really, really good in his own end. And there's lots to like. So we'll get into a bit more detail, but he's a really, really good example of a super mobile, super smart defenseman who just you don't have to worry about when he's out on the ice. TJ Ginla is just there with a question mark. Also a really good player. He is another one that's part of the more goals than assists club. I'm not scared. I ain't shook. Because he doesn't really have anyone to play with. Like he's not playing with Andrew Crystal, even though they're on the same team. He's setting up plays. Nothing's happening. He's scoring a lot of goals and he does have a good shot, but I wouldn't say that's like the focal point of his game. So I don't know. I think he'll probably regress to kind of more that he'll generate more assists a little bit towards the end of the year just because of the volume of plays that he's kind of setting up for teammates. But I really like TJ Ginla. Like he's in my first round, well into my first round right now. And I've got both eyes on him pretty good. Biggest rookie riser this year so far. So I'm assuming that means NHL rookie. I'm trying to think of the one that's impressed me the most relative to what I expected. It might be Brock Faber.
It is Faber. It has to be. At least I can't think of anybody else who would
like
qualify.
Relative to what I expected. Because like Fantilli is basically what I thought he was going to be. Connor Bedard also kind of what I thought he was going to be. He's gross, but like not scoring 120 points right away.
Leo Carlson's been good.
Leo Carlson's been very good, I think. Pavel Mintyukov, I think, also has been a guy who
might actually be the one.
Yeah, I wasn't super. I was surprised to see him on the NHL team right away or right this year, but he's been very, very good as well. So I'd say either him or Faber would probably be my answer to that.
I think I'd go Mintyukov, but only slightly.
Thoughts on Matvei Shuravin? So there's a lot of talk about Matvei Shuravin. So like we were just talking about Brock Faber, and I feel like Shuravin might be up that alley where there's not a ton of offensive tools, but the mobility and simplicity of the game is really good. Like he's a very conservative defenseman, but in a good way. So I can see why teams would want him in the first round for sure. I don't know if I will have him in my first round because the way I see things is a little bit more risk tolerant, where I'm sort of going, yeah, but like I'd like guys who can also play with the puck a lot more and don't need to sit back and let the other team to have the puck with, to be at their game. And I think Shuravin's like one of those guys. But he's a good player. Like I easily a top 2 round guy. He's better than I thought he was going to be going into this season. I saw a bit of him last year, but he's better than I thought he was going to be. This is a question that I've been thinking about since I saw it pop up, but how do you want the Canucks to spend its freed up cap space after trading Anthony Beauvillier? I mean, you got to be very careful, right? Because they've got contracts to sign. So I don't really know outside of just maybe a rental, but I don't know what that rental means. And it's, I think, still early in the year. I also think if I'm the Canucks, you have to listen to the analysts on that team who must be seeing the results they're getting and going, maybe pump the brakes a little bit on thinking that this is going to happen for the rest of the year. Like they're just firing on all cylinders, and recently they've been kind of slowing down. So I'm not sure that the best idea is to just immediately go, okay, now we have cap space, we can use it. We can use this cap space to do stuff.
I mean, like they did always under Jim Benning?
Yes. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. But I will say
defense
that
probably.
Philip Hronek, Quinn Hughes pair is so sick. They're so dynamite. I love it.
Yeah, they probably want to spend on defense. Like they should be in the market on getting Chris Tanev back, because like, is Tyler Myers really going to be a sufficient solution? I don't know. Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah. Thoughts on Herman Truff? Really skilled, lanky Swedish guy who I like quite a bit. I'd like to see him in the SHL for sure. Because I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's this thing in Sweden where guys who are probably good enough to be in the SHL don't really put in 100% where they're playing junior. And I think Truff is one of those, just because of how skilled the plays I've seen him stitch together, the shots he's, the shot he's got, the sort of mobility he has. There's a lot to like about Herman Truff. So hopefully he plays at higher level. Lucas Pettersson's another one of those, a guy who just recently played his first SHL game. I thought he looked okay in that game, but he's another guy where at the under 20 level you kind of have questions, but you kind of want to see him play against tougher competition. Um, what's Artyom Levshinov missing? Because to me, he may have the best chance of the draft to reach number one status. Well, I mean, my answer to that would be why. Like when I see Levshinov, I see a guy who is big, a pretty decent skater. He basically is like a David Jiricek, but instead of Jiricek liking to handle the puck in the offensive zone and get off the blue line and try to create stuff inside the offensive zone, Levshinov is more of a make a juke move at the blue line and shoot it. And that's where a lot of his offense comes from. Or if he's off puck, he just goes right to the net. Like he just goes, you know what, I'm just going straight to the net. So he's a bit of a cowboy in that way. And defensively, he has the same issues that Jiricek had, where it's like he's big, but he doesn't really win a lot of battles. And in front of the net, you'd think that he would be good, but he's more anticipating offense a lot of the time. He's waiting for that opportunity to sort of jump into the offense and go from there. So I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you think Levshinov could be. I don't think any defenseman in this year's draft, from what I can tell, has like number one status. Like there's only 32 technically number one defensemen in the league, arguably fewer. So that's a really high bar. And I don't know if he'll get there. But I mean, a top 4 minutes eating guy who can jump into the offense and have a good set of feet under him, sure, fine, whatever. You got me there. Thoughts on Axel Sandin Pellikka this year? I think he compares to a slightly worse skating Quinn Hughes, but with better vision and IQ. So Sandin Pellikka is a guy who, again, like loves to play offensively. Like he loves to have the puck on his stick. He loves to shoot it. He's got a good shot as well. And he's a guy where that's kind of what his game's going to have to be, is offense, offense, offense. So hopefully that's what ends up working out for him, because he's having a great season. I do think his shooting percentage is really high, especially even strength. But he's been good. He's taken a nice step, playing more minutes and not looking so bad doing it. He didn't look bad in the SHL last year either. It's just a matter of refining that defense, getting better at defending, which was a bit of a problem for him last year. I'm just scrolling through here, unless you found one that you want me to cover.
What, like how Tony Ferrari has made some comments on our.
Has he?
Yes, that's the next stuff that's under it.
Oh wow, the hockey news is very own.
Please come on the show, Tony. We'd love to have you.
Oh, Tony, yeah, we should schedule something. Not like he has a real job or anything at this point in the day, but one day, we'll have Tony on one day, whether you like it or not. Tony, you're coming on the show. Okay, yeah.
Now there's some Noah Gregor slander.
Yeah, well, whatever.
I like him, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, here's a good one. Did you foresee the progression in Hunter Brustevich? Were you high on him last season? So, no, I wasn't super high on him last year, and I still think there are issues in his game. Like, he's a guy who passes the puck really well, and when that's a thing that's a hallmark of your game, you can do very well from the back end. We talked about Aaron Kiviharju on Monday, a guy who isn't the best skater, not super mobile, but pushes offensively and uses his body and mind really well to create passing options and execute on them well. Brustevich is on a really good team. Carson Raykop has been playing out of his mind as well in Oshawa. They're a very good team, and Brustevich is a part of that. It's just, again, I can't deny that he's been playing very well. Like, you don't score like that in the OHL without playing very well generally. But I still think that with him at the next level, there will be challenges. I think that, again, points are a result of offense. So with defensemen, you have to be very careful. And Brustevich's problem, for me, the biggest problem was defensive rushes and playing along the boards in his own end and just being very unreliable in those areas. Moving the puck and passing the puck and seeing the ice well, he does that for sure. And I mean, where he was drafted, okay, sure. I think there were more interesting, NHL style players that you could have looked at first. But if you think you can develop him and fill in the holes that he has over time, sure. He's been playing very well, and I can't deny that. But I wasn't super high on him last year, and this year still, after watching a few Oshawa Generals games this year, I still feel somewhat similar. On the next one, also, is David Reinbacher that bad? So he's been hurt this season, so that's a caveat right there. I mean, look, it's the same thing as Dalibor Dvorsky. It's like they drafted him really high. They drafted him way higher than I had him on my board. But if David Reinbacher had gone around where I had him in the 20s, I think he'd be having a perfectly acceptable developmental season in the Swiss Pro League. This was last night, and Sam and I don't know, AJ, if you were paying attention, but Sam and I were watching.
I might have been too stoned out of my mind.
Okay, sure. Kids, earmuffs. But we were watching Daniil Ustinkov, who's a defenseman playing in Switzerland at the pro level. And Sam just sort of said, Sam is a Habs guy, and he also was not super high on Reinbacher last year. And he said, like, is this guy more interesting and more fluid and more careful with his defending and a better puck mover than David Reinbacher is? And I feel like the answer is yes. Reinbacher, I haven't seen a ton of him this year, but again, watching him this year, what I've seen, he still feels like David Reinbacher, like a solid guy who wants to play physically but loses battles. Not a super mobile skater, but moves the puck decently well with a really good shot. Like, the shot from the point that he has is really, really good. And that's kind of where he drove a lot of that offense last year. But shooting from the perimeter, even though your shot's really good, is not always a reliable way to generate offense. So I think that's kind of being exposed a little bit with him. But he's been hurt. It's tough being hurt early in the season. He'll probably play on a World Junior team. I don't know, because I don't think Austria is in the top division this year. So why bother? No, I don't. Oh God, now I don't remember whether they got relegated or.
I'll look it up
Germany.
and I'll let you know.
Yeah, look it up and we'll see. But anyway, I mean, at the end of the day, David Reinbacher, to me, I say this a lot now, he's still David Reinbacher, right? Like, I wouldn't have picked him 5th overall. I just wouldn't have. There are other players that I also like who are also having not middling seasons, but seasons that are going okay. And I don't know, like it's I don't think he's bad. I think people out there saying that he's bad are they're just haters. So in one ear out the other. And there's still a long runway. But similar to Slafkovsky, there is a very, very high bar forced upon this player, right? You're a top 5 draft pick. You're a 1st overall draft pick if you're Slafkovsky. That's a high bar. And you're saying no to a lot of guys to draft these guys. And a lot of those guys were, I think, further along. So the fact that Reinbacher isn't immediately, Moritz Seider, to me, it doesn't really surprise me. So I don't know. He's not, I wouldn't say he's bad, but he's still David Reinbacher. And that's still the issue to me.
And Austria is not in the
okay, so they got relegated.
Yeah, they got relegated.
So he probably won't be there, because I don't see a reason why he should go and play like Kazakhstan and Japan and whatever. So any thoughts on why offense has seen a huge increase league-wide in the past 2 seasons? My picks would be expansion, watering down talent, and goalies being worse overall. Okay, so those 2 things can't be true at the same time.
Right? Yeah,
right?
I just completely disagree with that.
The talent level can't be worse and the goalies worse and have offense be better. Like, what I would say, and I've done data analysis on this for Greg Revak. So Greg, if you're listening, I did this for you a few years ago, and the trend just continued to be true. So the amount that forwards are shooting and scoring has gone up for sure in the last few years, but the rate that shots have gone up for forwards is about the same. There are similar amounts of shots in a given hockey game these days on average. But what's happening is defensemen are significantly more involved in offense. I mean, look, Quinn Hughes is like 1.5 points a game right now. Like, that 10 years ago would have been absurd. That would have been crazy. Like, outside of maybe Erik Karlsson, but even him, like, he was a 80, 90 point guy outside of, that season he had last year.
He's kind of a forward anyways.
Yeah, right. So, but defensemen nowadays are on paper much more involved in play and playing offensively and playing with the puck. So there's that. The other thing too is that I feel this is anecdotal, but watching the NHL now, it is everyone can play almost. Like the players that can't hang stick out like a sore thumb more than ever, in my opinion. There are so many players that are really, really good and fast and skilled and can shoot that it just it suppresses the goaltending talent. Like I don't think the goalies are worse. I think it's just the ability of players to put a play together and score. Now that you have 5 players on the ice who can all play with the puck and all shoot and all pass and all, play off multiple options, that's going to cause offense to increase. Like, we say this a lot just in my circles watching junior hockey, but like to me, the gap from the NHL to the rest of the world is widening, right? Like it's just widening. So that's why I think you see a lot of younger players who go really high in the draft kind of have trouble adjusting to the NHL and struggle for a little while, especially if they're not that really dynamic, high skill, high pace guy right from the get-go. Like look at Alexis Lafreniere. He's had issues adjusting to the NHL as he is. So I think that's more of the case, more than anything. So I welcome it. I'm happy to see it because I love goals. I love when goals are scored. Someone just drops a Joshua Waugh on me. That's great. Arsen Timazov, I've name rings a bell. I don't have anything to tell you. The Sharks are currently carrying 10 defensemen. Of the pile, who would you keep as your top 6?
They have 10?
Yeah, it looks like it. San Jose. I mean, Matt Benning, I don't really think is I don't know. I watched a bit of the Sharks the other day. I don't think Matt Benning is it. I've never been super big on Ohotiuk, and I think he's been playing quite a bit. Yeah, he's played 12 games, so not every game, but I'm not huge on him. Who's been playing? Who's their defensemen who have been playing? Mario Ferraro, Kyle Burrows. Kyle Burrows is a guy. Jan Ruda is a guy.
He's all right. I don't actually mind him.
Vlasic is a guy. Emberson. Like, they just have a lot of guys. So, of the pile, who would I keep as my top 6? I mean, I guess Ferraro.
Can you chuck half of them?
Yeah, like I would chuck most of them.
Like Addison, Ferraro, and then maybe call up Niazev.
Yeah, you keep Thrun. Yeah, they have Artemi Niazev. I'd rather give Niazev a go rather than see what, a Ty Emberson can do or a Nikita Ohotiuk. Like Ohotiuk's never been a guy that I've super really believed in over the years, but I mean, I see why he's in the NHL, but I don't really know. The answer to the question is probably very few of them.
Get more deep.
Sharks are down bad. Yeah, it's like when your team is as bad as the Sharks have been, like it's hard to validate a lot of things. How's good old Husnudinov doing? He's doing fine. Now that he's in Sochi, it's funny how when a lot of young players leave St. Petersburg, they get a lot better. But Husnudinov still Marat Husnudinov. I don't know. I would like to see him come over. I think the Minnesota Wild could really use a player like him for sure, especially nowadays. Because who knows who's going to be on that team next year or 2 years from now. But I think he would fit in quite nicely. I think he's capable. I mean, he's been playing in the KHL for 3 seasons now. I don't think he's that much further away, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm a fan of him, obviously. I just hope he comes over because at the very least, I'm very curious
to
use
see
how he plays.
Honestly, I
think
it's a good experiment.
They could use. Yeah.
Also, before you move on, we did miss a question about thoughts on Anthony Stolar being the most criminally underrated goalie in the NHL. Now, I haven't seen enough of Anthony Stolar's to really tell you what I think. I don't know how you also feel about that.
Well, I mean, I feel like every year there are once in a while guys where they go, oh my God, this guy who's never been particularly good is all of a sudden amazing. Like,
but that's one to check out for us for later, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like he's a career, let's see, in the NHL, he's a career 9-12 goaltender.
That's not bad. That's really not bad.
But he also has only played
with Anaheim and Florida, if I'm remembering correctly. But hey, if that's with Anaheim, in Philadelphia.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, again, with goalies, I don't know. Nobody knows, right? Like Charlie Lindgren is like one of the best goalies in the league so far this season. Like, is that going to hold? I don't know. Right? Like, I have no idea. Right? Like, he's had 5 great games. If he has 10 more games and 5 of them are stinkers, he's going to look like a normal goaltender. So I don't know. Whatever. Goalies are weird. And I try to learn about goaltending and everything, but at the end of the day,
Makes your
they're
head
just,
explode.
yeah, and they stop pucks. Thoughts on Lucas Pettersson? Some people don't seem to like him, but I think there's a lot of potential with him. Just the speed and the skill level that he's got. Again, he has that pace in his game, that speed. So I really like him. I thought he was good in the SHL game that I watched the other day. Not fantastic, but solid. Um, he's a flawed guy. Again, another one of these guys that has potential but is flawed. Like, he can overhandle the puck, try to do too much himself. But he didn't really do that in the SHL. Like, I felt like when he was touching the puck, it was a lot more selfless and more team oriented, which doesn't strike me as surprising. Melvin Fernstrom, someone asked about him. I don't see a ton in Fernstrom. He's a guy that I think once in a game will really sort of dazzle you with a spin move or a skill move, but he's just kind of a smart, straightforward guy. I don't really have him. I don't think I have him ranked, but maybe one day in the future. What are your thoughts on Easton Cowan? Leafs really like to take guys now in drafts they love with players with intelligence. Yeah, I mean, Easton Cowan, I thought he played really well in preseason. I thought the hype train got a little out of control on him.
It was a little too nuts.
It was a little too nutty, but he was very good. I've seen him with London twice this year, and I still see the sort of pace concerns in his game. But he's also one of these guys where you don't really care because when he touches the puck most of the time, good stuff happens.
I will say, I still miss my Rasmus
Sandin.
Yes, who he was traded for, but
it is really silly that they traded that for Eric Gustafsson and he's not there anymore.
And now he's doing well in New York because there is a system there that's better for Eric Gustafsson.
Right. Okay, someone else asked about Easton Cowan. Okay, sorry if this has been asked. Okay, Brian. Hello, Brian. Sorry, I should say, and Brian Stewart. Sorry if this has been asked already since I just got here, but thoughts on the trio of interesting francophones: Sacha Boisvert, Alexandre Blais, and Raoul Boyard. So Boyard is on my list to look at sometime this week. I haven't yet. I saw a game of his, but I didn't get any data. Boisvert, I've seen 3 games of. I tracked 2. Awesome. I love Sacha Boisvert a lot. Like, if you want that high skating level, high pace, up the middle guy who plays at both ends and can shoot, like that's basically what Sacha Boisvert is. And I've been a fan of his all year. He's pretty high in my first round as well. Alexandre Blais is a guy who I've seen. I don't think I've seen what other people are seeing with him. I also, with Quebec, like, for me, the bar is really high. Again, like of the last few years, I think the only Quebec League guy who's really producing is Zach Leroux in the AHL, that is. So Alexandre Blais, I don't know. I need to take more looks at him because I can't give you a detailed answer. But Raoul Boyard, I mean, I've seen the tweets circulating about him, and I'm not sure I'm that high on him. But he's not a guy where you look at him and just go, oh, he's a point a game Quebec League guy, like whatever, who's this? Like, he's a very smart guy with size up the middle, like similar to Boisvert, but I don't think he has the same like pace level. But he's very, very smart. Like, Boisvert kind of has trouble moving the puck a little bit with his passing and everything, but Boyard doesn't really have that problem. Again, I'll know more in the near future because he's on the list for the next little while. But interesting player. But I definitely would put them at this point in the year like Boisvert, Boyard, and then Blais at the bottom. I'm gonna need a bigger water jug because my voice is going and I'm out of water. So too bad, so sad. Christian Humphrey thoughts. Any other NTDP forwards not named Yzerman who are interesting? So Humphreys I like. I think he's a fun player to watch. Still not sure what I think about him in general. I do like Kamil Bednarik on the NTDP. I like Charlie Purdue. He's not scoring a ton, but I think he could. Who's the other one? Teddy Stiga, also pretty good. Austin Baker and the guy, there's Brody Zemer. Those guys are also pretty solid. I don't get to look at the NTDP a ton at this point in the year just because video platforms don't have a ton of NTDP data. I keep spitting all over my laptop, so that's why I'm rubbing my computer. I don't know why I needed to tell you all that, but that's cool. But yeah, outside of Iserman or Hagens, like you asked, like I think the NTDP is a good team, but I don't know if there's anyone that's like sky high potential. Like I like Bednarik. There's a lot of guys I like. I'm not a huge Cole Hudson guy. John Whipple, I think, has nice potential, but again, not like sky high like an Iserman or yeah, like a Bednarik or a Baker even or Zemer. These guys are all really talented players, but again, give me some time because it's still early. Um, okay. I mean, I don't want to take forever to go through all these questions, but unless there's one that you found particularly interesting, sir. Um,
We could
but
go over, well, this next one about who are some of your early favorites on D-Man. Like you've kind of
right.
gone over
Yeah,
that,
sure.
but just
Yeah, sure.
reiterate for everybody who you really like.
Yeah. So the top defensemen on my list right now are Adam Juracek, who I really like the potential of, Sam Dickinson, who I think has some flaws, but also a very talented defenseman. Um, who else is up
Shit.
there?
Yep.
Zeev Buyam is another one. Anton Salayev, I like Anton Salayev, but you know, again, a guy with flaws in his game and will take time to develop. Zane Perek, I'm lower on Zane Perek than most people. I've seen him many times this year, and again, similar. I don't know. I don't want to say similar to Bruštevitz, but it's like defenders who have trouble defending are problematic. I find. Alphonse Fry, Swedish defenseman, I also really like. Artyom Levshinov obviously is a pretty solid option as well. I mentioned Daniil Ustinkov earlier. VT Väisänen is another one who I really like if you like this sort of more mobile puck handling defenseman. There's a few of them in this range for me, like late first, early second. I've got Ustinkov, VT Väisänen. Ustinkov's not small, by the way. He's like 200 pounds and 6'1" or something. Thomas Galvis is an undersized guy, but a great puck handler, great shooter, really confident offensive player. There is a Quebec League guy that I do really like that not a lot of people are talking a ton about, and that's Marcus Kiersey in Charlottetown. Again, super mobile, stick first defender. A bit of problems sort of when things get tough, high pressure situations, but as a puck mover and a passer and a manager of the puck, I think there's a lot there with Kiersey that I really like. Noel Franzen's another one, but beyond that, the rest are kind of a mixed bag. Shuravin and Yakimchuk are useful, maybe guys one day, but yeah.
And they're,
Shane Wright
yeah,
thoughts?
I like Shane Wright.
He's been solid, right? Like I watched a bit of him earlier in the year with Seattle. I don't think he's that awful. People are again, it's
He's not a world beater, but he's a
no.
solid player that kind of
And
fits in with the style of the Kraken. Like he's just a
yes,
Kraken center. He
a
can
lot of
shoot
things
good.
are a lot of things are going right for him, huh? Get it? But
Yes.
not a lot of things are going in the net. So I don't know. I feel like it'll just take time with him, just like it would take time with a guy like Slavkovsky to get to where people think he could be. Um, and again, it just is a testament to just how hard the NHL is. Now, I had concerns about Shane Wright in his draft year, but um, I don't know. He's coming along, and there were issues that I think are exposing themselves over the years. But I think he's been solid. Henry Muse, I don't have Muse ranked, unfortunately. I've seen him a few times and just have not. I don't know what he is. Right? Like I look at him and I'm going, okay, like he's chipping the puck around, he's moving it, he's whatever, but he's not. There's nothing like I'm like, oh my god, like this is it. This is the thing. This is the guy. You know, I just haven't really seen it. And again, like it's just to the point where it's like, what am I drafting him for? And I don't know. I've done 2 games of him on paper. I've seen him a few more times, and I still just don't. I don't see it right now with him. But maybe I'm wrong, and there's still 6 more months to go. 7 more months, I should say. Um, do you think Caden Lindstrom is NHL ready? Probably not. He's very talented. I don't know. He's one of these guys where I probably wouldn't want him in the WHL again, but I probably don't want him in the NHL. But he's kind of stuck because he's Canadian, because we have a weird hockey culture. But I don't know. There are still some procedural things with him, like overhandling and just overdoing it with him, but the talent is undeniable. And I think it's possible he gets a cup of coffee in the NHL next year. Um, but I'm not sure that he'll be there like long term. Oh, look, a spam call. This is like my fifth one in the last 2 days. Um, Samu Tuomola struggled heavily in Liga for a year and a half, then dominated the second division, and now he's almost a point a game in the AHL. Is there a reason he failed in Liga but thrived elsewhere? So I haven't seen a ton of Samu Tuomola, honestly, um, but he's always been sort of a zoomy speedy boy. Um, I'm not sure why it didn't work in Liga for him. The thing with him was always like he was scoring points, but only if he was shooting from the perimeter. Like he was doing the Oliver Wahlstrom bit when he was that age, where it's like, I'm just going to shoot from everywhere and see what happens. And I'm going to carry the puck the whole way myself. And then I'm just going to put it on net from the boards and see what happens. And that doesn't always work, especially at higher levels. In the second division in Finland, if you can skate, you're good. You're a good player if you can skate. And so it didn't surprise me that he did so well there. So we'll see. I mean, he's a solid player. I always kind of liked Tuomola, but I thought he was very flawed. But yeah, he's solid.
Liga's also weird. Like Brad Lambert
Yes.
didn't work in Liga, so
Yes,
I think
also
that can
place to play hockey.
that's one of the answers to the question.
Yes, that too. Thoughts on Carolina's pool?
It's good.
It's good. They draft a lot of guys that I like, therefore I'm biased. Bradley Nadeau has done pretty well as a freshman. Alex Rykov is looking pretty good as well. Scott Morrow off to another really good season.
Gleb
Trikazov has been not scoring, but I watched him in the KHL not too long ago, and he was okay. Timur Mukhanov has been very good, I think, in the KHL. I mean, I'm not surprised because he's freaking sick, but I like him a lot. Dominic Fensori, like I think Dominic Fensori is a really good example of why Carolina's strategy of not having an AHL team is kind of ridiculous because I watched one ECHL game he was in and it was dynamite. I watched one preseason game also where he was absolutely insane. So yeah, I mean, I like Carolina's pool. They're strong. And yeah, they're solid. Seamus Casey taking off this year. I'm not surprised. Seamus Casey rules. He was, I think, 12 on my board, 13, something like that. He's been very, very good for Michigan this year. Really, really talented. Is it too soon to say Zeev Buium is the best American prospect out of this year? I mean, I would probably temper that a little bit. I mean, I think Yzerman is right there with him. But other than that, I mean, Trevor Connolly, I think, is behind those guys. Michael Hage, I like a lot, but I think he's a step behind those guys right now. But I have room for him to go higher. I really like John Mustard, but I don't think he's quite on that level yet. But he's also very young. I think he's almost a year younger than Zeev Buium, which is pretty wild. How did Columbus manage to spawn in Oiva Keskinen? So Oiva Keskinen, if you go back and watch my recap from the year he was drafted, which I believe was 2022, he was a guy, I think I mentioned that he was one of the only guys that I had never heard of in the NHL draft that year that really impressed me. Like a really skilled, fun to watch guy, and his ability to just pull pucks around players and just push them wide and get around them can do wonders in Liga. I think he's been very, very good at that level. And I mean, for a 7th round pick, I think they really sort of did a really good job giving themselves a good player. R2 Karki, a guy. I mean, he scored a ton of goals right off the beginning of the year, and I think his shot percentage was like 40%. You know, guy who loves to shoot, guy who loves to carry the puck himself, loves to push things offensively. I don't know. I liked R2 Karki once upon a time, so maybe there's something there, but haven't. I mean, he's been fine. Thoughts on my take that Casey's better than Nemec? I think they do different things very well. Nemec, I've really liked watching in the AHL this year a little bit, but Seamus Casey's also a very, very talented player. I know that's not a very good answer, but they're just different guys. I mean, there's a couple questions about guys for future drafts, but that terrifies me.
Except for when you get to wax poetic about your boy Porter Martone.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's different. What did I think of Carson Raykoff in his draft year? Do you think he's going to have an impact in the NHL? I mean, I think it's too soon to tell. Again, it's still early-ish in the season, but he's been very good in the OHL, and the skill level was always there. And I think he had a much better back half that I remember last year than top half. So Raykop, I've liked. He's taken a big step, I think, in terms of just dictating play and really pushing things more than he used to last year, and showing up with that dictation more shifts in a game. And his team's really good around him, so that also helps too. But he's pretty good. I don't know about impact in the NHL, but where he was drafted, yeah, perfectly reasonable pick, and so far so good. Any small prospect that will be divisive this year?
Any small prospect is divisive.
Luke Misa, maybe. He's not super big, but he's not small. I mean, technically Aaron Kiviharu, like I don't have him. I have him in like I think I pulled him off my list last night. But I have him low. Maybe Nikita Artamanov. I don't think Cole Hudson's going to be very divisive. I think most people are going to not have him super high. Yeah, Luke Misa maybe is part of that, but I don't think there's a ton of them this year. I don't think. I really like Christopher Thibodeau. I agree. I really like him too. I think he's a nice upside swing. You might be able to swing later in the draft. I mean, you mentioned round 2. I think later. Is there anyone from the 2023 draft you have a significant change of opinion on since? Well, I mean, it's only been 5 months since the draft, so probably not. But Leo Carlson is better in the NHL than I thought he would be. I'll start there. Daniil Butt's been very good in the KHL, but I also really liked him. I don't know. I'm trying to think of
it's kind of too early, honestly, to really.
Yeah, it's really early. I mean, and a bunch of these guys, like based on how they've played since I've seen them, like I'm not really surprised. Like I'm not really surprised Tanner Molendyk is scoring so much. I'm not really surprised Gabe Perreault is scoring so much. I'm not surprised that. I mean, Easton Cowan, I think, has been really, really good. I think that pick was a bit of a surprise at the time to a lot of people. And I still, going back in time, I probably still would go with a Gavin Brindley or a Mikhail Gulyayev there, but especially, and that's including based on what I've seen of them this year. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's early, but I don't think there's been anyone that's like really just blown me away based on where I had them last year so far. Raykop's been really good though. He's probably the closest thing to that. Have you watched any of Cole Reshny? No, but he's on the list because he seems to be very, very talented. But he's a 2025 draft pick, so that's impossible. You were somewhat high on Mershot before he was drafted. If he becomes the next Sorokin or Shesterkin, I think you should consider expanding goaltending. I mean, I've tried to learn more about goaltending in the last few months. So I don't know. We'll see. Well, I don't know if I see anything else. There's a couple of Joshua Waugh questions, but I'm deliberately ignoring those. Someone asked about Raul Boyard. We did that earlier. Will Liam Danielson be drafted? I don't know. I don't have him ranked, but maybe someone will take a swing on him. I've always thought he was kind of okay. Can you tell us? Okay, here's a good one that we can both tackle. As a Penguins fan, can you tell me how screwed we are for the future? Well, I mean, you've got a smart GM. Kyle Dubas is not stupid, so that's a plus.
Yep.
But it isn't looking super great, I don't think, for Pittsburgh.
But Crosby is still awesome.
That top
still
unit
awesome.
is still like Rust, Gensel, Crosby, I think is the best line in hockey right now, if I'm not mistaken.
And they still have Evgeny Malkin as well, who's still great. Chris Letang is still good. Erik Karlsson, he is a forward, but he's very good. I mean, your future, it's to be determined.
Yep.
When Crosby leaves, it's probably going to be like 7 or 8 years of missing playoffs. But you know what? You had a great ride. Yeah. And you won 3 cups. So I don't feel sorry for you.
No. And I mean, also like John Ludwig's been a pretty good pickup for them. He's been solid. The little bits of games I've seen of him. But that's a small consolation. The clock is just ticking. No matter how you cut it, the clock's ticking. And I don't know if they're a Stanley Cup contender, but they certainly have players good enough right now that they're some of the better players in the league. But we'll see.
I still think they'll make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that like separates them from
Yeah.
the pack.
I'm
really.
with that.
Yeah. How much of the Sens' problems do you think can be fixed by a coaching change? So I think the Sens are very similar to the Oilers, where it's like they have the pieces are there, right? Like the guys who are really good are there. It's just the rest of them kind of drag things down, and I think that's something that has to change. But also, I don't think DJ Smith is a particularly good fit for like the NHL nowadays.
Yeah, I'm not a
I
huge
just
fan of DJ Smith. I
no,
honestly think that they're more in the boat where they've got more of a team and less reliant on their actual massive stars. Like I think Matthew Joseph is almost a point per game this year, which is kind of
Yep.
nuts. And they
Yep.
were trying to cap dump him, apparently. So
Yep.
I think they're a better team than what they've shown. Like I
Yes,
actually think they are a
100%.
better team.
Yep.
Are they going to compete even with like if Jay Woodcroft comes in? Maybe they'll be a fringe playoff team, but I don't know. I'm not super confident in that team being able to fully turn around. I think they're going to be all right, but I don't think they're anything special going
I think
forward.
if they can get to the playoffs somehow, they'll do pretty well. Like
Yeah, that's possible.
if they play the Leafs in an opening round, is it impossible that they get through the Leafs? I don't think it's impossible.
I
Like,
would still say it's unlikely, but that's just me.
Sure, but if I'm let's say it's DJ Smith or Jay Woodcroft, what do you tell Brady Tkachuk what his job is? See what your brother did last year to the Leafs? You do that, but like be more of a jerk. Like get like the Ottawa Senators would not make it easy for the Toronto Maple Leafs at all. And that's always been the thing I've liked about the Ottawa Senators is they have this like energy about them. But
they're not as fast as Florida, and that's where I think the difference is. Right?
Well, yeah, when they're slow, they're really slow. But they have the pieces, like they've got good players. How guaranteed is it that Montreal lost the Newhook trade? The first rounder was used on Gulyayev. I mean, Newhook's a good player right now, so that's a plus. Gulyayev's probably a few years away.
It's two good players.
I really like Gulyayev, but nothing's guaranteed with him. Okay. I mean, the rest of the questions, I don't know if I want to. Okay, I'll bang through them real quick because they're not super complicated. How much do you factor D-1 into your draft year rankings? So the year prior to their draft eligibility? Not a ton, honestly. I do it for like, who am I most interested in to check out next year? But I don't really worry about it that much. I mean, if there's something so noticeable, I'll notice it where I'm like, oh, I didn't see that last year. Like, oh my goodness, like, but not a ton. Thoughts on Sasha Boumedienne? I like him. He's a defenseman for next year. So I've seen him with Youngstown a little bit this year. He's a solid dude, looking good in the USHL at that age. It's not easy to do. So I expect him to be a pretty highly regarded guy next year. Skill gaps in leagues. How would you rank J20 in Sweden amongst the CHL leagues? I think the J20 league, I mean, it depends. Like it's a league of have and have nots. There's some teams that have a lot of resources and really good pro teams, and there are teams that don't. I think that there are teams in the J20, like Altoona is one, where they're sort of thinking outside the box and adding a lot of high pace, high skill guys and just trying to win that way. But some of the bad teams there are really bad. So I still think the WHL and OHL are probably better places to play overall. But Quebec, I think Quebec is just behind. And I think Sweden, especially once Sweden splits their season where the best teams play against each other, that is a good level of hockey. Like I don't think it hasn't happened yet, but it's gonna, where the best 10 teams go into a division by themselves. And that's a little bit different. Thoughts on Jordan Dumais' progression? Again, it's Quebec. Like Zach Bolduc scored like 120 points last year. Zach Dean had a gajillion points at some point, and they're in the AHL and not particularly doing well. I still think that once you put Jordan Dumais against professional competition, more physically mature guys, it'll slow him down. But again, like Hunter Bruchevitz, you can't deny that he's doing good stuff. And he's on a really good team, right? Like, so there's pluses there, and he's putting up the points. I think that's it. Yep. I think that's all the questions. So we're going to call it a day. Mr. Jadaro, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For being a friend.
But it's also my job.
Yes, that's true. AJ has a real problem just accepting compliments and things that are nice. We'll just point that out. You might figure that out the more you get to know him. But Rick Vive, thank you for coming by, even though you were pretty quiet most of the time. We'll see if we invite you back. And yeah, I mean, hopefully moving forward, the idea is that Thursday we're going to have some guests. So Tony, get fired from your job so that you can come on the show.
Be full time with
and
us.
That goes for and that goes for anybody who's out there who might be interested in coming on. But in any case, that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you liked the sort of quasi new format. And looking forward to the next one. We'll see you Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, where Sam McGilligan will be back with me. We'll be discussing all things that you would like us to discuss in prospect and NHL world. And thank you very much. And I hope you all have a lovely remainder of your day, lovely weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.